So again, a warm welcome to all of you. Great to see you. Returning back, hopefully from a fantastic Easter break, where you've been able to recharge batteries, find a new sense in life after some exhausting weeks with lots of lockdowns and other actually sort of impeding restrictive measures from your local governments. And I think we, with good spirits, actually, we today have a great opportunity and an occasion actually to celebrate something that was actually in incubation for quite a while, if I may say so. Our dear book. I also happen to have a fantastic box of those, like yourselves, hopefully sitting on your tables. And after a full 12 months, more or less, we finally made it over the try line or goal line, depending which sport you favor. And I'm very glad, actually, and grateful in particular for all of you, because I know you've put in a massive amount of hours into actually achieving this joint goal of producing this book. I know we are not actually living in isolation. We do have families. We do obviously these days have lots of other things that are on our mind, and nonetheless we've managed actually to conclude our chapters, to go through quite a rigorous, and I'm very grateful for that actually, process, tightly managed by Sean and Katerina, with a lot of charm, but also the necessary actually pushing happening in the back in order to actually make us move. And sometimes, once in a while, we've been a little bit lenient in that regard, and or shall I say complacent, to actually make all the deadlines. But we did it, and it's a great achievement actually bringing that idea to life. And I think as part of that, as most of you know, we started the Big LPM Idea series to convene people, bring them together who have an interest in LPM as a wider subject, not necessarily just looking at sequences of meta activities, but also those actually impacts, criteria that we see relate as corresponding actually to legal project management, be it actually the human factor, how to organize teams, how to actually see teams thrive, down to technology support, what have you. I mean, today I had the pleasure again also to have a discussion with a law firm, and they've been just looking at technology until they finally found out that technology is not going to do it in terms of actually taking LPM forward. It's also the organizational setup, it's the concepts actually driving it, and so forth. So all in all, I couldn't be any happier and prouder and more grateful probably than anyhow possible actually to see this happening. But it's not my book, it's our book, it's your book. And without you, it would be nothing. And it's your different perspective and angles. And I mean, obviously there was not pure coincidence driving the sort of the composition of this group, because each of you does bring a very specific perspective actually to the topic, from a technical, professional point of view, your vantage point in terms of your geographic, jurisdictional requirements is quite important in that regard, but you're also actually coming from very different organizational structures, be it private practice, in-house, consultancy, and so forth, or alternative legal service providers. So that's actually adding a lot to the experience that we try to share via this book. And the book is just the beginning. You know, we've sort of all made our mark now in history by putting in a first cornerstone, but you got to start somewhere. And this book is meant to be a starting point, not the end point of actually a development. So therefore, today for me, I'm very happy that we've managed to get to this point. I'm glad that most of you could actually join today. And I would love to hand over now to Sean from the publishers. Without your support, without your guidance, your insight in how to run this process, but also your rigor and your discipline, which is actually pivotal to successfully launching such a project and completing it, we would not be where we're at today. So over to you, Sean, and a warm welcome from this end.
Well, Thank you very much, Ignaz. It's a real pleasure to be here and to welcome you all, also to have a chance to meet those of you I haven't yet met. I know we have met some of you. It would be a pleasure to meet more of you individually as well. I guess my main task is to say a few thank yous. I won't hold you too long because we have more interesting things to talk about, but it's important to first of all extend my thanks to our thanks to Ignaz for his stellar effort as consulting editor. I think really truly outstanding from the beginning, and Kat obviously worked more closely with all of you and Ignaz on the text, but I know that you know, without your energy and enthusiasm and dedication, that the book wouldn't have come together. And we really appreciate all your help all the way through, including now in the meetups and ongoing, as you say. I think one thing that has struck us is the amazing sense of community that you've built around the book. And this for us as publishers is kind of what it's all about. So we have the book, but more important is, you know, the contribution to the dialogue on the topic, and which we also hope would like to be ongoing, and see this is a part of. We're very proud of the book too, and I think the title Next Stage and the concept of trying to deliver something that is different was important to us too. It's something that we are trying as a publisher to produce material that is genuinely useful and interesting and practical. And I think that is exactly what we have here. And as far as I can see, I know we would say this, but I don't think there is anything out there that is similar to what you all have achieved. But also, of course, to say thank you to each of you, or all of the contributors who have contributed. We know it's no small task to put together a chapter on top of busy day job, other commitments, yay, there's the book, other commitments that you may have or will have. So we really appreciate all your efforts, all your help, also all your enthusiasm in helping to spread the word. And I think that makes a really big difference for us as a small independent publisher during COVID. Having your help in spreading the word to the legal project management community is invaluable. And we'd be delighted to, you know, Kat and I are here on the other end of a call. We'd be delighted to speak with all of you about helping to spread the word about your contribution. So really that's kind of it from me, a big, giant, heartfelt thank you from all at Global Law and Business. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And a particular, and Katrina, you know, you've been sort of the daily victim of my email correspondence and sort of the hand-holding activities, guidance, and so forth. So particularly a big thank you going out to you in that regard, for being so patient and yeah, and sometimes stubborn on just chasing my back and making sure this is gonna go. And I'm sure you've done similar with all the others. So I can speak probably on behalf of all of us that your project management has been exceptional in that regard. And since this is a book about project management, I mean, obviously we know a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I felt the pressure with it being about project management, and it had to be couldn't shirk it. But no, not what it's been. I mean, it's been a real pleasure to work with you all, and you know, of course I'd say that to all groups of contributors, but it's been really nice to speak to you guys, because you're also engaged and enthusiastic about the topic. So it's been really enjoyable for me as well.
Thank you so much. So I thought, I mean, as part of today's sort of celebration or celebratory meeting, we should just actually have a couple of voices actually being heard on now that you've seen the overall book. I mean, none of you probably until actually receiving a book has seen the all chapters at once, and you see it's quite it has sort of arrived as planned. I mean, obviously, sometimes there's sort of the losses during the project or the things that may change, but otherwise, it's basically as we started out, we've seen actually the same chapters and same topics coming through. And in that regard, I'd love to hear from you. I mean, how you actually received the book itself, and for that, actually, may I turn over? What did you say, Aileen? Actually, you're the first. For what reason to talk about it? I mean, you mentioned something. I can't recall exactly what the reason was.
Oh. Well, I said age before beauty.
Good that you said that.
Because I'm probably the elder here. Secondly, I started with legal project management in 2006, before it was a thing. So the idea of being the veteran, our elder stateswoman. Okay, thank you. I hope that goes with the palace and all the accoutrements. And then finally, I may have a scheduling conflict toward the end, so I just wanted to get in here. And then I know Helga has some issues, and we want to hear from Helga very much as well. So project management for me all started when I was a child. I had a teacher who said that I thought in outline form, and I never really understood that that was a different way of thinking until I started taking personality tests and discovered Myers-Briggs, DISC, and so forth, that there really is a project management mindset and a project management affect, and that lawyers being heavily of a particular personality type and with a lot of research, it's been demonstrated that lawyers are among the most resistant to change, the least resilient members of the population. And last but not least, having been trained as a lawyer at a US law school and practicing law for 20 years in the culture of big law and a big company, you are taught that you can't make any mistakes, zero tolerance, and therefore you have to be right all the time. And that creates a mindset that makes it very difficult to implement legal project management with lawyers who think of themselves as scholars, artists, and pride themselves on their intellect. And in the case of the US, in particular, the adversary system, where litigation is not considered an alternate dispute resolution mechanism. It's not considered the worst alternative to a negotiated settlement in our culture, even though personally I believe that it is. So the idea of, everything is adversarial, it's not based on collaboration or making the pot bigger, heads I win, tails you lose, and that you're only going to get one shot. So all of those cultural issues, certainly in the US, and secondly, with the legal profession, have a very significant impact on the change management issues associated with legal project management implementation and process improvement implementation, and doing just about anything that's different than, quote unquote, the way we've always done it. So what all of us who've contributed to this book have focused on from one side or another is that challenge of change and change management. And while we may each have a section in the book, I mean, Lon Wasson and Hush Blackwell and his firm talk about codes and about cataloging data and taxonomies for different kinds of legal work, it still requires you to think about things not as this is what I do, but as something that can be broken down into component parts and analyzed, and in the course of analyzing it, reconfigure or identify best practices in the way it can be done. So against that backdrop, my chapter is about building a competency model for legal project management. And I was given the first chapter called The Value Paradigm. And in my chapter, I talk about what is value from the vantage point of the delivery of legal services, the fact that practicing law is not an end in itself, but is a means to an end, that our clients do not have legal problems. They may have legal issues associated with their business opportunity or challenge, or their personal opportunity or challenge. And I always like to go back to the very simple example of an individual buying a house. A lawyer looks at me buying my house as a real estate transaction and stuff about title and deeds. I look at buying my house as an economic transaction and providing a place for shelter. One is a personal and a business formulation. The other is a legalistic formulation. So the first thing that one has to deal with in addressing the value of project management is to decompose the default of what is the legal problem and the legal strategy, and go back to what is the client's definition of success in the language of the client. And David, for example, David Skinner in his chapter talks about voice of the client and listening to the client. Now that's language that comes out of the process improvement world, but it is intimately the foundation of legal project management. Because the very first question you have to ask is why? Why does this matter to the client? And what does success look like from a client point of view in the client's language? Until you have all of that in place, it's very difficult to effectively proceed to how you're going to organize the project. And throughout the life of the project, one has to be checking in to make sure that those goals and objectives have not changed. New stakeholders may appear, external circumstances may occur, or the client may have just decided to change his or her mind. So against that backdrop, we set out to say, how can we decompose what a project manager does in the legal sphere and make a competency model so that as people enter the field of project management, there is a systematic way of describing where they are, where they need to go, and where are the gaps. And my chapter talks about the foundation for how to build a competency model. And it also talks about the work that Ignaz and I and some of our colleagues at the International Institute of Legal Project Management have been involved in for the past 6 months in building out a competency model. Helga Butcher, based in the UK, with a group of firms in London and with some of her business experience from Barclays, has also built a competency model. And at some point, the twain will meet, because I don't think the industry needs more than one model, just as a matter of ego. But the framework that the IILPM competency model used was to think about the way PMPs are trained in project management. And within project management, it's based on the notion that there are knowledge areas and there are process areas. So what we did was we broke it down and said that there are core knowledge areas, and we define them as the legal practice, the legal industry ecosystem, legal operations, the legal project life cycle, and project dynamics. And then we set out to define what the components of each of those are. And so we are pretty much done with our inventory of those 5 knowledge areas and what is embedded in each of those knowledge areas. But we wanted to take it to the next level, which is it's not enough to have an inventory. One needs to have actionable tools to deal with that. And so the premise is that you have different levels of competency. And what we articulated were 4 different levels of competency: awareness, knowledge, skills, and expertise. Basically, anybody can read our book and read any of the other literature that's out there about legal project management and be generally aware of it. But that doesn't mean they have a deep knowledge of it. They may have a vocabulary, they may be able to spot it as a thing they need to address, but we characterize that as only awareness. And then we move on to knowledge, which is I have studied this, I have a body of knowledge, I may have gone to a training program, I've worked on some hypothetical situations, so I have knowledge of it. Then you move to the next stage, which is I have skills. I can actually apply what I know. And in the PMP universe, you have to have 45 hours of practical experience and demonstrate that you've completed a project. Lon, did I get the number right? We've got a card-carrying PMP on the call. And then you have to go through renewals every year to be able to, or every other year, to be able to demonstrate that you don't just have the designation, but you also have ongoing professional development and further augment your skills. So as project management in the legal sphere matures, part of what we want to be focusing on is how do we assess which level of competency people have, and then create professional development programming to enable people to close gaps and to be able to advance. And so that falls into the sphere of micro-credentialing. So the example that I like to give is that you find somebody who has really deep experience in project management in the manufacturing industry and has been phenomenally successful. A law firm or legal department hires them to become their legal project manager. And they have no knowledge of the legal ecosystem. They have no knowledge about how lawyers work. And then last but not least, their personality style or the way they communicate, because they're used to command and control rather than herding cats, doesn't mesh in the legal environment. So a legal project management competency model would say this person is an expert with regard to all the core project management skills that we typically refer to: intake, planning, execution, and review, but they've got a big gap with the legal ecosystem, and they can be educated on that. And then they have some needs for some coaching relating to the project dynamics and the personality issue. So it's not, oh my God, we hired the wrong person. It's the competency model gives those in the legal universe, law firms and law departments and other providers, the ability to be able to assess and close gaps to improve the competencies of those involved in project management. To close, our competency model is operating on the assumption that there are 3 points of entry for looking at the competencies, the knowledge areas, and the skills. Either you are a lawyer who wants to get more deeply involved in project management practices, and you use it for the purposes of enhancing the client relationship or client service delivery, or improving the profitability of the matters you're working on, or how you manage your teams. You may be a legal project manager who can come from any kind of background, and you're part of a team and you want to be able to enhance your skills and progress as a project manager in legal. Or you're already in the legal industry, but you want to go into LPM. So an illustration of that would be somebody in the marketing department in a law firm who says, you know, I really want to get closer to handling matters. I don't want to just be involved in pitches. They have knowledge of the culture, of the ecosystem, but they don't, and they probably, having survived in a law firm, have the personal characteristics to get along, and probably will be a team member and capable of mastering the project dynamics, but they don't have the core project management knowledge, which will involve understanding how to scope a matter, how to do a work plan, how to do budgeting, how to do staffing, how to do monitoring and assignments, and then obviously closing the matter in review. So that's really our Rubik's Cube of the framework. And in the chapter in the book, it lays the theoretical foundations for how we came about developing this, drawing on literature from lawyer competencies and project management competencies, culminating in the work of our group, where we hope we'll be able to release it by the end of the second quarter of this year.
And we're looking forward to that, Aileen. It's been a while since we started, but there has so much time gone into this project, and it's quite illustrative of the idea of the book, because when we first actually put obviously the outline together, the first draft of the table of contents, and discussing that with each of you bilaterally, I mean, the general feedback was, I love to do this or that. But in hindsight, everybody agreed that the scope of and the breadth of actually topics covered would be enormous. And now you call this actually an LPM book. So you also actually expect an LPM manager to basically address all these topics from team management to technology, to costing, to risk management, understanding legal design, and so forth. And that was actually prompt enough actually to kick off the broader conversation around the competency model, because there is none. So we expect people to read our books and say, okay, this is it. This is your basket, your portfolio. Please run with it. But we tend to forget that what we are asking for is an enormous amount of money. And usually a T-shaped lawyer is a two-dimensional concept, but because it's actually basically entailing your main pillar being your own expertise, and your two touch points to sort of adjacent disciplines being at management technology. But in this book, we see management technology can be a lot, actually, by definition, a lot more. It can be KPIs, as you rightly pointed out, Lan, in your chapter, going very deep. It can be also an entire sort of communication-driven strategy, like what you pointed out, David, in terms of the client listening, the client's voice. Actually, it can be actually an organizational development aspect, what you pointed out, Mitch, in terms of combining business development, LPM, and so forth. And I think that's a nice actually example to highlight the sort of the role of the book, the minor or small role of the book, but just actually driving certain discussions. And we had a couple of others of those. For instance, the legal workflow canvas was actually launched as a microsite to help people understand the process management part that's also sitting in our projects, in our matters, to understand that a bit better. There were a couple of conversations. I remember a talk actually with your firm, Nina, around leadership principles, actually linked to LPM. How do you bring your leadership culture together with your LPM actually managerial style? And what do you need to look at when doing that? And so forth. And I'd say in its breadth, probably quite a demanding portfolio. So just actually looking at a competency profile will not be enough. All of us are actually called upon actually to act as ambassadors and try to identify additional ways to educate the younger ones. And by saying this, the book has also been quite helpful, and a lot of you may not know, but there's a couple of initiatives actually happening around the globe for alternative legal education within the confines of either state or private university, but the normal tertiary system that we've in place. And one, at least in Germany, will in the future also offer in fully entrenched education around legal project management and corresponding aspects as part of their normal bar exam. So that's about actually knocking on wood to happen, hopefully starting with the European winter this year, so that lawyers actually start understanding the broader concept of actually being managers of legal processes rather than just becoming lawyers by definition or by training. in the first place. And I know there's other initiatives happening around Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, Larry Bridgesmith can't join us today. Pauli Institute is doing a great job in that regard. A couple of universities have already actually agreed to make the book part of their compulsory reading, to actually open up their students' minds actually to new ways of actually looking at things. For that, I think gratitude is just a very small aspect. I mean, talking about Larry, he should be with us actually in a second. So you just need to call someone by name to have him appear actually on screen. So once he's connected to audio. Hi, Larry. I was just talking about the fabulous things you do in the context of the Pauli
burning,
Institute.
Larry.
Say, I'm sorry, what'd you say, David?
I said your ears must be burning.
Well, I had another meeting and I thought, I hope they're not done yet. I just got to see their faces and hear their voices. So, how are you
Larry,
guys?
it was great. Thank you. Larry, I was just talking about the fabulous things you do around LPM education at Vanderbilt and the courses you're running over there in order to sort of broaden the legal education.
Well, I'm delighted that there is a dean of a law school someplace who would listen to this crazy guy who said, you know, we probably should be teaching lawyers skills to practice law, not just the subject matter of topics of surrounding law. And so he created this whole program with us, the program in law and innovation, for that very purpose. And because it was something that the faculty wouldn't endorse, and he knew that, he paid for it out of his own budget until it became a thing. So, you know, it takes a vision like that to get any kind of traction in this legal industry, and we all know that too well.
But we're hopeful, and you know, we're in times are actually working in our favor. And yeah, I haven't forgotten. I mean, I usually ignore Canada because these guys, like the Australians, are always ahead of the learning and the curve in principle. So you will forgive me for saying that, but it's what I've seen from Canadian law firms and Australian law firms. They're probably the most competitive due to their markets across the globe. And so therefore, I'm also glad, I mean, your chapters, David and Karen, if I may address you jointly, I mean, have been outstanding in that regard. And I believe the sort of rationalizing something that's widely perceived as being just more or less a discretionary approach like LPM, where even, I mean, I recently had a comment, it sounds like actually some sort of a semi-philosophical approach. I said, no, it's hard work, and there's actually a process and a procedure and a framework driving it. I mean, you've actually, you've proved in your chapters that a well thought out strategy is actually much more than just a couple of buzzwords, and really actually are gaining ground, actually following these procedures and then following the rules actually that are embedded in those actually approaches.
Yeah, it ties back. Oh, sorry, ties back to some of the things that Aileen was talking about, that it's always a challenge to get people to move away, adopt change, move away from the way they've always done things. And what we've done is really worked with firms to think about what they do in terms of value, using the lean perspective of what's value and what's waste, and really getting people to focus on where they deliver value, so they're delivering more value with less effort and less waste. And that for us has been what's allowed us to bring some of these process improvement ideas into law firms, is really to get them to focus on the very, very basics. You know, lots of law firms like the idea of project management, and they try to bring project management in, and it works or it doesn't work. But what we do is try to get them to come down to the next level, a foundational level, and say, okay, if you're going to create a work breakdown structure, if you're going to, map out your process, you might as well fix it first before you try to manage it. and then you're going to really get the value. So we view process improvement as being that sort of foundation for good project management, and that's what we both tried to get across in our chapters. You know, from the client's perspective, what is really valuable to the client, and then from the law firm's perspective, what is really valuable to the firm, and how you can align those. So that's really where we're coming from. Unfortunately, we are going to have to jump to. We have a client call in a couple of minutes to discuss the process mapping of their due diligence process. So it's apropos of what we're doing. They have it's one of the largest firms in Canada, and they are looking hard at how they do their due diligence and how they can make it more efficient and more effective for everyone. So that's that. David, did you want to jump in with anything? No, we're all good. Okay,
So
goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much. It was a delight to work with all of you, and we will see you the next time we do a meetup.
So in this case, yeah, thank you to the two
Oh,
of them.
I don't know any speaker. There we go.
So that takes me basically, as I said, to almost to the end of today. I mean, this was really meant to bring all of us together. And you've met a couple of the authors, in particular those who I mean, some of you, the authors amongst themselves have already interacted. What I learned, actually bilaterally. So that's not a coincidence. That's well intended. If you please do more. You've also, for those who are joining us for the first time today, we run these big LPM idea meetups, not for the sake of actually selling any products to you. We do have lots of them actually to sell, but that's not the intent over here, but rather actually to create a community where you can actually, in a safe space, openly discuss issues that are actually on your mind, that you feel are relevant actually to your practice or your legal department. And we try to find interesting speakers who are not allowed to actually use more than two PowerPoint slides, actually to move away from the traditional, I bomb you actually out of the room with a slide deck, rather actually focus on the topic itself. And the next one will be someone from Eversheds, James Barrett, the European LPM manager, actually talking about data visualization, and most likely someone from the US, not yet actually confirmed, on the 22nd. And then in May, we'll have the pleasure actually to hear about freelance LPM managers, because at the moment you find a lot of lawyer on demand services, but there's no LPM managers on demand that you can quickly rope in and actually use for the purpose of actually running your strategic matters or specific actually sort of clusters of matters. And together with Lillian, Nadine Lilienthal, who's actually a lawyer and someone who's actually working in the coaching space, will also look at the invisible aspects of legal matter management. That's all happening in May, so stay tuned for any announcements on we don't send any emails, don't worry. This was a complete exception this time, because the website at the moment is in a process of actually being beautified. You know, in volatile times, you need to turn them around a bit quicker than usual. And then we're in the process of actually making the event registration, which obviously is free of charge, a bit more friendly and efficient, and try to avoid these massive actually Excel spreadsheets at the back end. And on the other end, actually make it more a platform also with content actually to be shared and to be used and to be posted on that side. So that will continue, obviously, with all the other projects. I hope there's a couple of other news that we can share around this. So please use the book, mingle, network, liaise with your counterparts, and share it with others. And Jody and Julie, as sort of newbies to this group, and Diana, if I may say so. Maria, I'm not sure. I think you've attended one of our meetups before, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is my second one for the big LPM.
Okay.
I've watched the others on YouTube, most of them, not everything.
So you started with your loyalty card already and got a couple of stickers on it. So
Yes.
Very good. So please feel free. You're more than welcome actually also to share the story. Everybody is invited to those meetups, and then we'll continue what we've started. and enjoy the book. I hope there was something in it for everybody, because you've only, as I said, you've seen your chapters, now you've seen what the others have actually drafted. And I'm sure there will be one or two aspects that that may look actually promising in terms of actually being implemented at your place. So in that regard, enjoy reading, stay healthy wherever you are, and we'll meet shortly, somewhere, at least virtually. So all the best and take care. Thank you.